So your question, Caleb, it's in r/Xbox, but you say the KCD2 devs said that Series S actually helped them develop for other systems. Thoughts, considering it seems like you've been down on the Series S before, not antagonizing, just curious. No, you're absolutely fine. I have kind of been down on it before because I feel like it's held it back. AAA, like cross-platform games, it's held it back. But that being said, I think that this is an interesting question because you're right. The dev of, I think it was Vavra actually said that the Series S helped them. Or no, it was Toby. I think Toby mentioned it in an interview. He said that the Series S actually helped them develop for other platforms because they had to get it scalable on that platform. That helped them kind of scale it to other things, which I think is true. If you can get it working on the Series S, you should be able to scale up to more powerful hardware more easily because you're always developing for the lowest common denominator. You know, a chain is only as strong as the weakest individual link. So if the Series S is the weakest console you have to develop for, if you've made everything light enough that that link can hold it, if there's bigger chains, you'll still be fine. So to a certain extent, that doesn't surprise me. You know, all of that language is not surprising or shocking, you know, in any way. But it made me think of something else about the Series S I hadn't really considered before. That was from an interview that Destin, friend of the channel, actual friend of the channel, Destin did this interview with Phil Spencer recently. And there was a little snippet of it that I found the most interesting. I think in the whole thing, in the whole, however long this interview was. And it has to do with Series S. Parity, you know, across different games, making sure all games run on this. But just listen to this, okay? Because it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I'm just going to let him say it.
Would you ever consider dropping or adjusting the Xbox Series S parity clauses with the Xbox Series X, those sort of requirements? Some developers have brought up difficulty optimizing for the Series S. Can you tell us any more about plans there?
Yeah. Age-old examples would be like Black Myth Wukong claiming that, you know, impossible to get the game running properly on the Series S, so that's why they haven't come. But then other people say that it's an exclusivity thing. So who knows what actually prevented Black Myth from coming to Xbox. But the other more obvious one would be Baldur's Gate 3. They couldn't get the split screen co-op thing working on the Series S, so they got a special variance from Phil to put it out without that feature on. But that required a special variance from the CEO, you know. But other than that, that's always been the standards, that all games have to play on Series S and be the same. They can have different like graphical standards, but the content has to be the same.
Yeah, in a way, I think about it in almost exactly the opposite way right now. With the rise of handheld PCs and even the introduction so far of the Switch 2, as developers, we're building on more device specs, from lower powered, because they're battery powered devices, all the way through things that plug into the wall. I actually think we have a real advantage because we've been targeting S for quite a while, that our games have been built and they're portable across many different specs. So when we look at something like a Steam Deck or a ROG Ally or something, we've got this S version of the games that's more tailored to the device specs of a lot of devices that frankly are getting introduced right now. And I think that helps us. And frankly, the scalability of engines today allows them to scale from, you know, ray trace enabled multi-$1,000 graphics card on desktop PCs, you know, all the way through a handheld battery powered device. So for me, S has been helpful in our portfolio. And I'm playing Indiana Jones on the S and it looks great. So like it's definitely capable of playing current generation games in a great way. But most of your games that are going to be out there are going to be supporting these different devices. And the S spec of what it is actually maps pretty well to the devices that we're seeing introduced right now. So I think it actually is an important design point for teams going forward, that kind of power performance mix that you see in the Series S.
I hadn't thought about this. Hadn't considered it. One of the things that's been rumored for a while is that Xbox is going to do some sort of handheld in the next couple of years. There's been patents, there's been speculation, there's been, of course, the obvious no duh that probably makes money. But I hadn't really directly connected in my head the fact that having had the Series S as a requirement for their devs for this whole generation should in theory make it much easier to port those games to an Xbox handheld because you've already had to develop them for the weaker hardware on the Series S. You know, it doesn't deal with the core frustration that many of us have with the Series S, which is that it's held back the level of ambition that devs can have when it comes to the size of worlds, environments. It's basically all just tied to memory at the end of the day, because that's the Series S's main restriction. But it is interesting to think of the Series S in the context of handheld computing devices as being a competitive advantage for Xbox. Because if they do a handheld, they just have to get it performing roughly on the same level as a Series S, which was already roughly the same level as a 1X from years and years ago. So that shouldn't be that impossible to achieve. And sure enough, I can't think of an Xbox Game Pass release I've not been able to get working on like the ROG Ally. The only thing that's struggled a little bit has been Flight Sim 24, but that runs like ass on everything. So I guess that's not really a surprise. But I do think it's interesting to think of that, because if you think of PlayStation doing something other than a Portal, you know, let's say that they come out with like a new PS Vita type of device, and the idea is that it can play PlayStation 5 games. That hardware has to be a hell of a lot more capable and powerful to either run at the same level as a PlayStation 5, or they release it weaker than the PS5. But then devs have to go back and specifically optimize to get it running on that hardware, which maybe they aren't able to do because the game was never intending to do that. So honestly, a really interesting flip of perspective that I hadn't really considered. I still stand by everything I've said with the Series S because this doesn't change anything. You know, the Series S is still the most, still the weakest console on the market. And therefore, if you're making a game that's got to scale to Xbox and PlayStation, if you're developing for it, it's got to be developed for the lowest common denominator. That still applies. And so I think by definition, the Series S has held back the games that cross-platform devs have been able to make. But in the broader context of the industry, introducing handheld devices, which are becoming more and more popular every year. I mean, it's ever since the Steam Deck and the Switch really popped it off. We're now getting ROG Ally, ROG Ally X, the Legion Go. We're about to get a new Onslaught. There was one revealed at CES that has like an 11-inch screen. It's ridiculous. You know, there's a lot more of these that are coming out, and there will be even more in the coming years. And like we've said at the top, there's a rumored Xbox handheld that's in development that I'm sure he knows about, that he's thinking of, and is probably specifically why he's insisting, nope, Xbox Series S, we need that parity, we need that scalability so that you can buy the Xbox handheld and play all of your Xbox games on the go. That's all part of it. So it informs the vision that they have. You don't have to agree with the vision, but at least you can kind of start to see what Phil is going for, which is that they've said for years, play Xbox anywhere through cloud, through your PC, through your laptop, through your Xbox, and eventually a handheld. And the idea is that if you have the Series S as the lowest common denominator, devs have already done the legwork for years to prepare for that handheld, which I find to be kind of an interesting reversal, because I was struggling to find the upside with the Series S other than a cheaper price point for entry into the lineup. But, you know, which is that is an upside. Don't get me wrong. That's great that more people can play games. But I think that more damage has been done with how much games have been held back. But this could actually be a real competitive advantage for an Xbox handheld if this holds true, which is just an interesting thing I hadn't considered. Phil Spencer, brain blast. Yeah, you guys are saying he looks bad. I actually think Phil looks really good. I think he lost a lot of weight. I saw him at Summer Game Fest back in June. Dude looks like he's lost 40 pounds. He looks like, I think he looks way better than he did even back over the summer. So I think he got that Orange Theory membership, or he got his Peloton, and he's been going crazy. So good for him. Valve is really just that far ahead of the market, I guess. Switch did it first with the handheld console parity, but Valve showed that games don't need tons of optimization to make it work. Well, it's PC games also have been for years very scalable. If you port to PC, you're building in scalability by default. It's the games that were built without the intention of ever going to like PC or other platforms and were developed very specifically for this very specific set of hardware. Those are the ones that you have trouble with. It's like, you know, how the Gamebryo engine that turned into the Creation engine, how it tied the frame rate to the physics sim and to the animation systems. So all of this was tied together because it was supposed to run on consoles primarily, and they didn't think of tying other things to the tick rates from servers and world clocks that you would use for that, for synchronizing players across different geographies and time zones. And so all of a sudden they make a couple changes, introduce multiplayer components to the Creation engine. And if you have higher frame rates, you just move faster. Like the whole thing breaks. It was the big thing in Fallout 76. If you looked down, set all of your graphics settings to the lowest possible, and you got crazy frame rates, your character would physically move through the map faster, because like significantly faster, because they had tied player movement speed to frame rates and tick rates and all this other stuff that they just started steadily breaking because they'd never considered it a problem before. When they were designing the engine originally, they never thought that they would have to worry about tying animation speeds to server tick rates or anything. Like it just was never something you even thought of, which I find really funny, how just something you never thought of ends up coming back to bite you. You know, Elden Ring did that. Elden Ring on PC still stutters like a mofo for me. Like it's for me, it's basically unplayable. I just can't, dude. It's frustrating because I'd like to play it on the go with the RG Ally or something, but I just can't. It stutters too much. I don't know how people put up with it. Which GPU do you have? 4090. Like everything I've seen is that the more you play it on the same driver set, you're fine. So if you download the drivers and then you play through the game for like 10 hours, you're through most of the difficulty. And the stutters will be resolved because it's mostly compilation, like shader compilation issues and stuff. Is it the Intel CPU problem? No, it's a different thing. I literally quit because of it 15 hours in. Yeah, dude, I just can't. Especially compared to the PS5, it just works better. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Elden Ring still is locked at 60 on PC. It doesn't run faster than that. That's another instance where they tied enemy AI to the frame rate, so certain behaviors only trigger a certain number of frames. And so if you download one of these mods to like uncap the frame rate or just allow it to go to 100 frames or 200 frames, enemy AI starts to break. Like bosses will just stop moving and all sorts of other things start to break down, which is funny. He took my thing.